In the world, kind of communications there. We have Facebook and Google adding what they're calling trust indicators to sort of police the content and avoid something that they've been getting rapped about, fake news. Red Alert Politics contributor Angela Morabito, who's a little bit cynical about this, and that's probably an understatement. What are you seeing here, Angela?
Well, we're looking at Facebook and Google creating an exclusive club of their preferred news outlets. So we're going to log on and get served their preferred version of the truth. And I think it's a bit insidious and honestly a bit frightening that facts that Facebook and Google don't like, they can effectively, demote. And these facts would never see the light of day. They wouldn't have access to the audience.
So who is deciding these and what criteria are they using to screen what is believable versus not believable, real versus fake?
Well, Facebook has been particularly opaque about the criteria that they use, as has Google. But we do know from past employees blowing the whistle on both of these companies that Facebook artificially manipulates its trending topics. So they're not topics that people are talking about. They're topics that Facebook wants people to talk about. Google does something similar with their search results, where they will take generally left-leaning outlets and privilege them in their search results. So news that is just straight news, or news that even speaks to facts that conservatives are craving, that conservatives need to know and everyone should hear, those will be on page 2 of the Google search results, which no one will ever see.
Right. Another thing I worry about, maybe being an economic journalist, Angela, is that you can make a liberal or conservative argument for any set of economic facts, like the tax cut plan. You could make a very real argument that it's tilted exclusively to the rich. You really could do that. There's another plan where you could step back and say that it's just as much not tilted to the rich. It's how you delve into the data and when certain things kick in, when they kick out. But it's not as black and white as saying, Martians landing on Antarctica. And I say that not to patronize, but to make the point that has to be discerned by very, very careful, smart judges and people who can go through this with a fine-tooth comb and not make blanket left or right judgments or say, no, I'm a slave to news and this is the news and this is the reality. It doesn't work that way with all stories. There are nuances to them. There are other ways to play with the numbers. I know I'm being verbose, but to explain that when it comes to certain news stories, like the tax cut story, like economic matters, there are a variety of ways to play it. Now, who decides what of that gets out?
Well, Facebook made an interesting bet on this when they first tried to tackle the fake news issue. And what they did was they would let users flag certain stories. And of course, what do users do? They flag the stories that they don't like, right, whether it's true or not. So that system would leave us with a lot of extremely popular lies. That's going to leave us with fake news that people seem to enjoy that day. And that doesn't really help us move forward, because it's not, the truth is not decided by popular demand. Facts are facts, and people voting on things true or false doesn't necessarily make them that way after the fact. So when you have companies that are privileging certain news outlets over others, you've now created an artificial competitive scenario between companies to create stories that Facebook and Google are going to like. And that's in service of corporate interests. They're not public utilities, and it's not in service of getting to the ultimate truth.
Yeah. A popular fake news story has always said that the president pushes this tax as being the largest in history based on the sheer number. I think what he's trying to say, more Americans today living than ever have been, and so more Americans will participate in it. And technically, by that math, he would be accurate. But as we think of tax cuts, for example, coming down from a very, very high level to a much lower level, that would be how you define a biggest tax cut. Yet, if you got lost in that definition, the definition of fake versus real becomes very difficult, very different. And that's why I'm worried about these organizations then coming to their own judgment, what's real and what's fake. You could be just perpetuating the beast.
Right. There are all kinds of ways to frame news stories, especially tax reform. We have sides saying everyone's going to pay more, everyone's going to pay less. You have all these different ways to frame it, and you can essentially make numbers say anything you want them to based on how you frame it. So the risk with granting more power to these technology companies is that only one frame is going to make it into the public sphere. There are 10 different ways, probably 1,000 different ways rather, to discuss things like the tax bill. And if we're only ever seeing it framed one way, we'll never get to know all the different impacts that that bill could have. And that leads to people making uninformed or misinformed decisions.
I think you're exactly right. But it is a danger in news, particularly when we're covering these kind of matters. Angela Morabito, thank you very much.